everyone, this is CricketSong with Lunar Wisdom, and today's video is going to be discussing the topic of covens. And the reason why I'm doing a video on covens is because the word has been coming up quite frequently to me in the last 4 days or so. I've watched a few videos on what is a coven and thoughts about covens. I've had a couple of text messages from individuals asking me my opinion about covens. I've had Facebook messages asking how do I start my own coven, and just everybody bringing up the concept of covens to me, so I figured that was a sign to do a video in me discussing the whole concept of covens. First, I want to let you know that you're going to find a link in the information section of this video to a video I made previously in regards to the titles of High Priest and High Priestess. Now, it isn't directly about covens, but it does cover some information in regards to those titles and positions which are within a coven, so you might want to check that out as well. So before I give you my opinion and my thoughts on covens, I want to discuss what my perception of a coven is, so that you are aware of where I'm coming from when I am thinking and discussing what a coven is. So from my perspective, a coven is a group or an organization of witches. And usually in my head, a coven is at least 3 witches, and normally not more than 13. That's in my head, that's my size of what we're talking about if we're talking about a coven. And what I mean by witches is magical practitioners, those who practice witchcraft or the craft of the witch. And this group, these witches, would come together on a fairly regular basis, meaning once a month, once every other month, once a week, twice a week, whatever regularly means for them. And they would, in my opinion, have to meet frequently enough so that they could establish a rapport between them. They would have a relationship, an intimate relationship, not a sexual relationship, but an intimate relationship. And this would take time to establish. The relationship would be based on affection, on love, on trust, on honesty, on similar beliefs. It would be a relationship where they would support each other. The witches would support each other, both spiritually and mundanely. There would be a friendship, like I said, a genuine affection for the well-being of everybody within that group. And again, I stress that this doesn't happen overnight. This would take time to build. The group of witches would have a similar mission or goal. They would have what is called a group mind, meaning that they are focused on the same things. They think alike. It's almost as if they work as one mind, because they have similar vibrational frequencies. They would share responsibilities of what's going on in the group, meaning that one person, even though there would be a leadership, because with every group or organization like a coven, especially in a larger group, there would generally be a leader, one who sort of organizes and facilitates and steers the group. They would not be elevated as someone more valued. Each member of the group or the coven would be equal to the other. There would be shared responsibilities too, meaning that they would, if they were going to do something, they would all be responsible. They would all feel responsible and welcome the responsibility, because they understand they are only as strong as each individual is. So each witch is strong or weak, making the coven either strong or weak. My thought is, in a coven, you would be bonded with each and every other member of that, and you would welcome that bond. So that's what I mean about a coven. I view a coven as very much like an organization, like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts of America is an organization, and it has a president and a vice president and a secretary and all these offices. I view a coven in the same way, that there are offices within this organization called a coven. And again, for more information on that, please see my other video where we talk about the high priest and the high priestess. So my thoughts on a coven, and I jotted down a couple of ideas. Okay. Generally, covens are of a specific tradition. You know, you have Gardnerian, you have Alexandrian, you have Dianic, you have all different kinds of covens that follow a set tradition. And these rules and bylaws within a coven are passed down from the previous coven, because the high priestess generally came from a coven and then hived off and started her own coven. I understand that and I respect that, but personally I don't feel that that is the only way a coven can be started, and I don't feel like that's the only way every single coven is started. And I know there's some thought out there that an individual would need to have formal training and come and be trained by a high priest or a high priestess from a traditional coven in order to establish a coven. And that would be the only right way to establish a coven. And in that, I have to disagree. And the reason I say that is because, again, like I say, you know, you can call yourself whatever you want. I mean, and you can start a coven if you feel like it. Anyone can. For example, if you are someone that just did your year and a day training and you did it out of, what is it, Timothy Roderick's Year and a Day book, and you did that and you self-initiated or self-dedicated yourself, and now you're excited and you want to start a coven with a group of your friends, so you pull them together and then you decide you're going to follow whatever steps you need to establish this coven, and then someone else is telling you you can't because you never studied under a high priest or a high priestess. Well, yeah, I think you can. You can start a coven if you want. Go right ahead. But understand, your coven is going to be as strong as whatever members are in your coven, including yourself. So if you only have a year and a day training and your best friend has 6 months training and your other friend has a year and a day training, then your coven is only going to be strong as you, the three of you, with a year and a day training under your belt and 6 months under your belt. And you may find other people who want to join your coven. But you, like I said, your coven is only going to be as strong as the members in that coven. It's going to be very different than a coven that has been established for 10, 15, 20 years. It's going to be different. But it doesn't mean that you can't. You can. That's my thought. I do think that in order to start a coven, or even to join a coven, you need to be honest with yourself. Honest with yourself as to your motives for either seeking out a coven or for starting your own coven. And you need to be authentic when you are approaching either joining a coven or starting a coven. You need to be honest with yourself and authentic with other people and be true to your true, authentic self. I feel like that is a very important part, because if you are going to say that you are going to start your own coven and you only have a year and a day training and you only trained out of Timothy Roderick's book, then when you are talking to other people and you say you are high priestess of a coven, you, I feel, need to be truthful and say, you know, when asked what your credentials are or what your history is or what your education is, to be honest with the people that are looking to join you. I feel like that is of the utmost importance, to be true to your word and to be honest and true to yourself. And if you have and you are, and people still want to join you, then that's great. You are establishing a trust, and you're establishing a balance of honesty and personal integrity that is important for having a coven. Because like I said, if you're working with a group of people, it's important to have that rapport, and you don't want to start a relationship based on lies. You want to start a relationship based on truth. Now, my experience with covens, I was never formally trained in a coven. I was never formally initiated into a coven. I studied Wicca, I don't even know how long. So maybe 9 years. It's longer than I thought. Could be a little, she might have been 2, so we might be talking 8 years. And I had started, I self-studied, and then I sort of mentored with someone online, and then I also had my mentor who owned the metaphysical store here in the city, one of the metaphysical stores here in the city that I live in. But it wasn't a formal mentor-student training. It was, at the time, if I had questions, I would go in, she would direct me to books to read, and then I'd read them, and then I'd ask her questions. So it was, and I attended one of her circles. So it was like that. It was very casual. And then time went on, and I was looking for more personal group work. So I began what I called a circle of learning, which was a group of us that came together, different experience types, and we'd come together and we'd pick a book based on Wicca or witchcraft. We'd read the book, a chapter, then we'd come together and we'd discuss it, and we'd share personal experiences over the week, and we'd discuss, you know, points in the book that we agreed with, points we didn't agree with, why we agreed or didn't agree with it. Then we'd do some arts and crafts kind of thing together. We would celebrate the Sabbats and Esbats together. We didn't do much spell work, but we did some, and I did that for a while. And the problem that I was having with that is that the same people weren't consistently showing up. You know, some weeks I'd have 5 people show up, some weeks I'd have 2 people show up, some weeks nobody would show up. So it was very inconsistent. But over time, as that went on, I ended up having people, the same people, show up all the time. And when we started doing that, we had all agreed that we were looking for more structure, and what would it take to turn our circle into a coven. And was everybody on board, and everybody was on board with that. So then I researched what it would take to change our status from a learning circle, to a coven. And at one point, the open learning circle changed to a closed learning circle before we finally birthed the coven. Now, I was honest with everybody that came to our learning circle, and they knew where I came from, and they knew what I was about, because all of them had started with the learning circle with me and realized that I was never initiated into a coven. I was upfront with that with them, so they knew what they were getting into with me. So at this point, the learning circle is a coven, and we've been a coven for over a year. So, and we're going strong. Now, what you do need to understand if you're thinking about starting a coven is that it is an organization. And in being an organization and being the leadership of the organization, you need to be honest with yourself and understand that it's a great undertaking that you're getting into. You will be president of this organization. You know, you will need to have leadership skills. Whether that is within a coven setting, which I think if I would have had would be much more beneficial for me, but because I have had leadership positions in the mundane world, you know, I was a manager, I was a supervisor before I was a manager, you know, I was, task leaders. I mean, I've always had that, where I've always had a group of people that I had to motivate and facilitate and get things done and have been responsible for. and held accountable for. So if you've never had that kind of responsibility and you're jumping in to be a leader in a coven of another group of people, then be prepared. Because like I said, you need to have leadership abilities. You need to have good communication skills. You need to know how to motivate people. You need to know how to inspire people. You need to know how to facilitate. You need to know how to delegate. You need to know how to handle conflicts and understand what it means to resolve conflicts. Because when you get a group of people together, no matter how much they work in harmony, everybody's coming from a different point of view. Everybody has a different perspective on things. And sometimes we get so emotionally attached to our perspectives that it's hard for us to see the greater picture. And you, as the leader of the coven, would be responsible for finding compromises. And if a compromise can't be made, then you're the one that's going to be held responsible for making the hard decisions. So before you jump into starting a coven, think about what you want out of it. How formal is it? Are you just going to meet every week with a group of friends and just talk and hang out? Is that a coven? You can call it a coven. It may not be what I view as a coven. It may not be what other people view as a coven. But be honest with what you do. Be honest with what you say. I feel like that's the most important thing. And understand that, creating and maintaining what would be traditionally viewed as a coven takes a lot of energy. It takes commitment. It takes time. And if you don't have the time, the commitment, or the energy to do it, then don't do it. You can practice and have a successful practice as a solitary. Now, just because I am part of a coven does not mean I don't have my personal practice. I still maintain my personal practice. It's very important to me. And I feel that if I didn't have a personal practice, then I wouldn't be of value to a coven. Because I bring that with me when I work with my brothers and sisters within the coven. I guess that's all I wanted to say. And if you have any questions about my personal experience, or if you have questions about covens or would like my opinion or have something to share, please leave a comment, send a personal message, or do a video response. Everything is welcome. And as always, guys, until next time, I love you.